Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a book that defies self-help traditions by encouraging readers to not attempt, to say no frequently, and to embrace negative thinking. You must give a fuck about something if you don't give a fuck. The traditional approach to self-help concentrates on what you aren't. It also zeroes in on what you already consider to be your particular flaws and failures and highlights them for you. Giving a fuck about more isn't the answer to a wonderful life, it's about giving a fuck about less, about only what is true, immediate, and important. You're locked in what Manson refers to as the feedback loop from hell when you're angry about being angry or anxious about being nervous. You short-circuit the feedback loop from hell by not giving a fuck that you're feeling lousy. You say to yourself, I feel like shit, but who gives a fuck? Because we can now see or know an unlimited number of things, there are an infinite number of ways to learn that we don't measure up, that we're not good enough, that things aren't as great as they could be. And it tears us apart on the inside. What does it mean to not give a fuck? Subtlety number 1, not giving a fuck does not imply indifference, it merely implies acceptance of one's differences. A life lesson hidden in plain sight. There is no such thing as a person who does not give a fuck. You have to care about something. You can't be both a joke and an embarrassment to certain people while still being a significant and life-changing presence for others. Subtlety number 2, you must first give a fuck about something more important than hardship in order to not give a fuck about adversity. If you find yourself continuously giving too many fucks about minor annoyances, it's likely that you don't have much going on in your life to give a true crap about. What does it mean to not give a fuck? Subtlety number 1, not giving a fuck does not imply indifference, it merely implies acceptance of one's differences. A life lesson hidden in plain sight. There is no such thing as a person who does not give a fuck. You have to care about something. You can't be both a joke and an embarrassment to certain people while still being a significant and life-changing presence for others. Subtlety number 2, you must first give a fuck about something more important than hardship in order to not give a fuck about adversity. If you find yourself continuously giving too many fucks about minor annoyances, it's likely that you don't have much going on in your life to give a true crap about. The more you try to feel better all of the time, the less content you will become, because pursuing something just confirms that you don't have it in the first place. Alan Watts, a philosopher, referred to it as the backwards law. Surviving the related negative experience is the key to achieving anything valuable in life. Not giving a fuck means facing life's most daunting and challenging obstacles and still taking action. When you give too many fucks, when you give a fuck about everyone and everything, you'll believe that you're always entitled to be comfortable and happy, that everything is meant to be just the way you want it to be. Pain and loss are unavoidable, and we should abandon our attempts to avoid them. The most painful facts in life are usually the most difficult to accept. Suffering is biologically beneficial, hence we suffer for that purpose. It is nature's favorite catalyst for change. Don't expect a life free of challenges. There isn't anything like it. Rather, wish for a life filled with positive issues. Problems do not go away, they are simply exchanged and/or upgraded. Problems that you enjoy having and solving lead to happiness. Nobody who is truly happy has to tell himself that he is happy in front of a mirror. Emotions are merely biological cues that point you in the direction of positive change. Negative feelings are a wake-up call. It's because you're expected to do something when you experience them. Note, Tony Robbins goes into great detail about negative emotions in his book Awaken the Giant Within. It doesn't mean something is wonderful just because it feels good. Everything comes with a cost. Whatever makes us feel happy will certainly make us feel miserable as well. What pain do you desire in your life? Is a more interesting question, one that most people never contemplate. For what are you willing to put up a fight? Because it appears to be a bigger factor in how our lives turn out. What do you want to enjoy? Isn't what decides your success. The crucial question is, how much agony do you wish to endure? The road to happiness is paved with shite and disgrace. What you're willing to fight for defines who you are. Our triumphs are determined by our struggles. Our issues, together with slightly better, slightly upgraded problems, give rise to our delight. The problem with the self-esteem movement is that it based self-esteem on people's feelings about themselves. However, how people feel about their negative elements of themselves is a true and accurate reflection of their self-worth. Every event in their lives is either an endorsement of or a danger to their own grandeur for people who feel entitled. The actual measure of self-worth is how a person feels about her negative experiences, not her positive ones. Yes, sometimes I'm irresponsible with money. Yes, sometimes I exaggerate my own successes. Yes, I rely too much on others to support me and should be more self-reliant. Yes, I rely too much on others to support me and should be more self-reliant, and so on. A person with a high sense of self-worth can honestly examine the negative aspects of his character and then act to improve them. Many people fear accepting mediocrity because they believe that if they do, they will never achieve anything, will never progress, and that their lives will be meaningless. The few people who succeed at something truly outstanding do so not because they believe they are exceptional. They, on the other hand, become exceptional as a result of their obsession for improvement. And their concern with improvement originates from a firm conviction that they aren't all that wonderful. If pain is unavoidable, the question we should be asking isn't how can I end suffering? But how do I cease suffering? However, why am I suffering, for what reason? Self-awareness is akin to peeling an onion. The basic comprehension of one's emotions is the first layer. The ability to ask why we feel specific emotions is the second layer. This layer of inquiry aids us in determining the source of our overwhelming feelings. We can ideally do something to change the root problem once we understand it. Our own values are the third level. Why do I regard something to be success/failure? How do I choose to assess myself? What criterion am I using to evaluate myself and those around me? Everything we are and do is based on our values. If what we value is unhelpful, if what we consider success/failure is badly chosen, then everything we think, feel, and think about will be dependent on those values. Everything we are and do is based on our values. Everything dependent on those values, thoughts, emotions, and day-to-day feelings, will be out of whack if what we value is unhelpful, if what we consider success/failure is badly chosen. Much of the advice out there is superficial, aiming to help people feel better in the short term while the fundamental long-term issues remain unsolved. Consider something that has been bothering you for a long time. Now consider why it bothers you. There's a good chance the answer will involve some type of failure. What is absolutely true about your circumstance is less significant than how you view it, how you choose to measure and value it. The measurements by which we judge ourselves and others are determined by our ideals. You must adjust what you value and or how you measure failure/success if you want to change how you see your challenges. Happiness is the result of pleasure, not the cause of it. According to research, if one can meet basic bodily necessities, food, shelter, and so on, the relationship between happiness and worldly prosperity quickly fades. Constant positivity is a sort of avoidance, not a viable answer to life's problems that, by the way, should invigorate and motivate you if you choose the correct values and measurements. We reject the presence of our life's troubles when we force ourselves to stay happy at all times. And by denying our difficulties, we deny ourselves the opportunity to solve them and create happiness. Problems give our lives a sense of purpose and significance. Some of life's most significant moments are not pleasant, successful, well-known, or positive. Good values are 1, grounded in reality, 2, socially beneficial, and 3, immediate and manageable. Bad values are 1, superstitious, 2, socially damaging, and 3, uncontrollable. When we have bad values, that is, when we establish low standards for ourselves and others, we are effectively giving a fuck about things that don't matter, things that really make our lives worse. The notion that we choose it and are accountable for it is often the only difference between an issue being painful or powerful. If you're unhappy in your current circumstances, it's likely because you believe some aspect of it is beyond your control, that there's an issue you can't handle, a problem that was imposed upon you without your consent. What occurs to us isn't always under our control. However, we always have influence over how we understand and respond to what happens to us. Note, Ryan Holiday goes into great detail regarding perspective in his book The Obstacle is the Way. We will have more influence over our lives if we choose to embrace responsibility for our lives. Note, principle number 1 in Jack Canfield's The Success Principles is take 100% responsibility for your life. As a result, accepting responsibility for our issues is the first step toward resolving them. Many people are hesitant to take responsibility for their problems because they assume that taking responsibility for them entails being at fault for them. The blame/responsibility fallacy permits people to absolve themselves of responsibility for their issues. Our perceptions are flexible, and our memories are notoriously untrustworthy. The more your identity is threatened, the more you will avoid it. This is known as the Law of Avoidance by Manson. We free ourselves up to act, and fail, and learn when we let go of the myths we tell ourselves about ourselves. Your troubles aren't particularly unusual or exceptional. That's why letting go feels so good. Everything will seem to threaten you the narrower and rarer the identity you establish for yourself. As a result, explain oneself in the most basic and everyday terms imaginable. Questions to help you create more unpredictability in your life. What if I'm completely wrong? What does it signify if I'm mistaken? Would being mistaken produce a better or worse difficulty for myself and others than my existing situation? It's important to realize that every change in your life requires you to be wrong about something. The ability to consider and assess other ideals without necessarily accepting them is possibly the most important talent for really changing one's own life. Manson tries to live by a few principles, but one that he's developed through time is this: if it's a choice between him and everyone else, it's far, far, far more probable that he's the one who's screwed up. If it feels like you're up against the world, it's really just you versus yourself. The size of your success is based on how many times you've failed at something, and improvement is based on thousands of tiny failures. If someone is better at something than you are, it's because she has failed more times than you have. If someone is worse than you, it's most likely because he hasn't had the same difficult learning experiences as you. We can only be truly successful if we are willing to fail at something. We are unwilling to succeed if we are unwilling to fail. Life is about not knowing what to do and then doing it anyhow. Motivation is not only the result of action, it is also the source of it. If you're lacking motivation to make a significant change in your life, start by doing something, anything, and then using the reaction to that action to motivate yourself. We urge ourselves forward when the criterion of success becomes merely acting, when any result is perceived as progress and essential, when inspiration is seen as a reward rather than a requirement. We have the freedom to fail, and failure propels us forward. Finally, the only way to find meaning and significance in one's life is to reject all other options, to limit one's freedom, and to commit to one place, one belief, or, gasp, one person. In order to appreciate something, we must all give a crap about it. And in order to value something, we must reject everything that isn't it. A deep and subtle kind of entitlement is the desire to avoid rejection at all costs, to avoid confrontation and conflict, to try to accept everything equally and to make everything cohere and harmonize. The difference between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship is determined by two factors: 1, how effectively each partner accepts responsibility, and 2, each person's readiness to both reject and be rejected by their spouse. Two people who strive to solve each other's problems in order to feel better about themselves are signs of an unhealthy relationship. Rather, two individuals in a healthy relationship tackle their own challenges in order to feel good about each other. People who blame others for their own feelings and actions do so because they believe that if they portray themselves as victims all the time, someone will come along and save them and give them the affection they've always desired. Entitled people who blame others for their feelings and actions do so because they believe that if they fix and rescue their spouse, they will be rewarded with the love and appreciation they've always desired. It might be difficult for people to distinguish between doing something voluntarily and doing something out of responsibility. So here's a litmus test. Ask yourself, how would the relationship alter if I refused? Ask yourself, how would my relationship alter if my partner declined something I wanted? It's not about giving a fuck about whatever your spouse gives a fuck about, it's about giving a fuck about your partner no matter what he or she gives a fuck about. Conflict exists to show us who is truly there for us and who is only there for the money. Both parties must be willing and able to say and hear no in order for a relationship to be healthy. When trust is broken, it can only be rebuilt if two things happen: 1, the trust breaker admits and owns up to the underlying values that led to the breach, and 2, the trust breaker has a good track record of improved behavior over time. Death is the light against which everything of life's purpose is judged. Confronting the fact of our own mortality is critical because it eliminates all of life's mediocre, fragile, and shallow values. You will die as a result of the fact that you were fortunate enough to have lived. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.